Making a quick video here for some science builds. Some fleeties have expressed interest. I've shown a couple cruiser builds in tech and engineer. So here's some of my science builds. This is my torpedo science boat. It's the Crossfield from Discovery. You could use a very similar build on just about anything with a 4-3 layout science ship. You could use it on a 3-3. The only issue with a 3 forward and 3 aft is you'd have one less weapon slot, so you'd have to choose what to drop. So for this torpedo build, I'm using the gravimetric photon torpedo, which is buffed by EPG. Particle emissions plasma torpedo, also buffed by EPG and control. And the neutronic torpedo, also buffed by EPG. So combined, these are all very good heavy hitters. As you can see, the neutronic does about 10k kinetic plus radiation. This one does about a 7,000 total damage plus a plasma torpedo. Leaves like a cloud that does plasma damage and slows. Gravimetric does about 7,500 kinetic damage, and then it's got a 33% chance of destination to leave a gravimetric rift behind. If you do a torp spread, it always leaves the rift behind. So that's actually one of my highest damage abilities in like a crystalline entity or an ISA, is actually the gravimetric rifts left behind from a torp spread. Then I'm using the Terran Task Force beam. The reason I'm using that is I'm using the 2-piece bonus. I'm using the console and the beam, which gives me 13.3% projectile damage. And the other Terran console, which I'm using in an engineering slot, gives me hit points, weapon power, aux power, reduces a shared torpedo recharge time. So that's why I'm using that. Then I'm using the Solene deflector. That's one of the higher EPG deflectors in the game. There's some others you can use now with re-engineering that'll give you more. Colony deflectors being one example. Secondary deflector, strategic deteriorating secondary with EPG and sensor analysis damage. You can get this one from the Fleet Research Lab. And then I'm using the temporal defense and impulse and warped core for the 2-piece bonus. A 2-piece bonus off of temporal gives you 25% all damage over time and hazard effects. And also I like this one for trajectory jump. It gives me a quick little easy teleport to kind of help me scoot around the battlefield. Shields, I'm using the Iconian resistance. You could use any shield here. The reason I'm using Iconian is because I already had it at Elite. It's here, and it removes shield disabled conditions, and it reduces all energy damage to shields. There are other options. You could go for the 3-piece for temporal. If you go with something, you could go colony shields. There's a lot of different options there. Aft weapons, I'm using the House Martok torpedo. Reason being is I have the 3-piece bonus for the House Martok set, which gives explosive shearing torpedo modifications. Special torpedo modes, high yield, spread, and transport warhead gain 20, leave behind a 20 damage resistance debuff on their target. And then the 2-piece gives me 2.5 crit and 15 accuracy. So I'm using the House Martok 360 beam, torpedo, and engineering console. The engineering console, as you can see, gives me some turn rate, shields, engine shields, and hit points. So these two consoles alone are buffing every single one of my weapon settings. And then science consoles, running temporarily shielded data core, which gives me physical resists, kinetic resist, EPG, and control. But I'm using 2 exotic particle phasers, one with Drain X and one with Control X, both EPG. Disruption pulsometer, which gives me EPG and control. Delphic Tear, which gives me plus 20 bonus exotic damage and some crit severity. I'm using this tachyonic converter. This is the only low-buy console in the entire ship. This one gives me some crit chance, crit severity, turn rate, and more control. Mycelium ambush. This one gives me EPG, drain, control. The clicky is teleports you 8 kilometers forward. I find it's pretty handy to use exactly 10 kilometers when you're closing with an enemy, because it brings you to within 2 kilometers instantly. Fire everything, and then it brings you back out. By that point, it'll bring you to about 8 kilometers, so you're relatively safe. It's a one-trick pony, but it's got some decent passives. Assimilated module, using this for, again, crit chance, crit severity, but also for the 2-piece bonus, which gives me, again, 2.5% chance when firing energy weapons to gain 10 weapon power and reduce weapon draining costs. I'm only using 3 beams, so really weapon power is not an issue. But, little extras, always good. And then I'm using this, which is a timeline stabilizer. To use this, it gets 15% reduction on science bridge officer abilities, which is great. If you don't have it, you don't have it. I would, insert another universal console, or maybe bring this one down to here, and then put in another exotic particle focuser. This is from the Krenim ship, which you can only get from a Phoenix box now. Stat-wise, as you can see, shields, about 16.5. Resists are pretty low, 14, 30. This is not a tanking ship at all. It's a science ship. If you want a tanking setup, use a tanking ship. Crit chance is only 13.8 and crit severity is 101. You'll see why in a moment. And then science skills, I'm running about 150 readiness, 338 EPG, 177 drain, 236 control. This build is mostly about EPG and control. Shield hardness, regeneration, all that's pretty stock. Skill-wise, I'm using a science ultimate tree. So I've got maxed out science, almost maxed out. So I got 8, 27, and 11. So I'll go to the start here so you can kind of slowly scroll through, see the options I chose. Control amplification, improve control, drain. Coming down here, hardiness. I went with these to help buff my torps. I maxed out torps because it's my most damage is from torpedoes. Max long range sensors and EPG. And then readiness here. Now alternately you could have dropped maybe this point here and put it into tactical readiness, but I haven't really needed it. Specializations I'm running temporal and strategist. Instead of strategist you could also run constable if you wanted. If you want more of a single target focused PvP build. For PvE I would definitely use temporal and strategist. Trait wise, starship traits I'm running improved gravity well, checkmate, weapon system synergy, standoff, particle feedback. So again, this is giving me hull penetration whenever I use an exotic ability. This one is giving me 15% damage to anything in front of me. Weapon system synergy, firing a beam, buffs my torpedoes. What's not to like? Checkmate, whenever I use jam sensors, gravity well, photonic shockwave, anything like that, it gives me 30% projectile damage, 30% exotic damage. Kind of a no-brainer for a torp boat. And improved gravity well, duh. Reduce cooldown on gravity well, increase duration. Space reps, I'm running torpedo pre-fire to buff torpedoes. Particle generator amplifier gives me more bonus exotic. Omega kinetic shearing gives 10% of my outgoing damage as a dot. 4% crit chance and crit severity. And then active rep, just the standard reps. And again, I don't have these two unlocked because science, you don't need ground. Personal space traits, meaning on the ground a science character is ridiculously overpowered. Space traits, using accurate. Conservation of energy gives me 10% bonus exotic damage. Some defense. Projectile training, which again I could go to K13 and make that superior projectile training. Particle manipulator, 50% critical hit chance for exotic abilities. So, exactly, I don't need that much crit hit chance or severity because it's being buffed by this trait. Kinetic precision, 10% shield penetration for projectiles. Photonic reinforcement, innocuous, so more crit, less threat. And operative, more crit and crit severity. Ability-wise, with this ship, I'm using Gravity Well 3, Subspace Vortex 3, Hazard Emitters, Polarized Hull. I could put something else here, but I tend to always run these two abilities on ships. They're just too handy not to have, in my opinion. Engineering Team 1, Emergency Powered Weapons 1, Chronometric Inversion Field 1. So I have 1, 2, 3 control abilities that do kinetic damage and also control ships and keep them in place for my torp spread. So your next torpedo launch within 30 seconds will be upgraded to launch a series of 5. I'm using Beams Overload, and reason being is that it boosts all regular beam attacks and it's another hard hitter. Torp builds are always about big crits, Beam overload helps to improve that. Attack team. Override subsystem safeties 3. This increases all power levels. I use this at the very start of an engagement and then pop my gravity well. So if you look right now, my gravity well is going to do 1650 kinetic damage. This one's going to do 2500. And this one's going to do 853. I'll pop this. Now it's doing 2000, that's doing 3000, and that's doing 1000. So just having a high, it increases all your power levels, which is going to increase the damage for all these, and again it's going to boost your beams. And as you can see, it brings everything up. Now once it dies down, one of these subsystems will go offline for like a second. So right there you can see, this is the one that went offline, which would be engines, and you don't even notice it. Destabilize Resonance Beam 1, that's again from a mission. One of the Iconian Arc ones, or Solanae, I can't remember which. But again, this one, as I'm doing it, gives me 1100 physical damage, and it reduces, the resistances on the enemy, and jam targeting sensors, again, a survival skill. So that's pretty much it for this ship. Again, I'm running my power levels. I'm using right now, I got it at 100 for Ox, which gives me 116 total. I have weapons only at 30, because you know what? I don't need them. It still takes them up to 77 from bonuses. And right here. Both of those are set at 35. This build will get you about 130 crystalline entity and about 80 in an ISA. 80 to 90. Let's go to the next character. We're going to go to Romulan. So this is in the multi-mission Science Explorer. Real quick, I need to send him somewhere where you can actually see the stats. Fleet Solanae Dicer, that should do it. I should have planned better so there would be no downtime. Alright, so this guy is in the Reconnaissance Explorer Warbird. This build uses some of the consoles that come with the Explorer Warbirds. If you don't have the 3-piece Vesta set, no big deal. You can use other consoles in those places. So I'm still running 2 torpedoes up front, using gravimetric and particle emission. Again, because these two, since they work with EPG, are basically a must for any science build, in my opinion. You could just run beams in one of them. And if you had to pick just one, I would probably pick the particle emission because it's the cheapest to get, although this one is the hardest hitting. And then I'm using a coalition disruptor because I had it. Solanae deflector. Strategic deteriorating. I'm using the elite fleet combat impulse for this one. And then I'm using the temporal shield and singularity core to get me the 2-piece for temporal. 3 360 beams in the back, kinetic, omni, and ancient omni. Now I could swap this out, put the House Martok and something else like that, but since it's KDF, I prioritize this console, the dynamic power redistributor. Increases all damage resistance, all directed MG, and then on the buff, it gives bonus all damage, which includes exotic. Kinetic, I need the assimilated, so it buffs the kinetic cutting beam. Again, 2 particle focusers, 1 EPG, 1 control, temporally shielded data core, an exotic particle field exciter. This is a crafted item. Again, EPG, control, and then this is where it differs a little bit, where I'm using the all of the consoles, all 4, that buff the Alliance multi-mission. And then the reason being is you look at the 4-piece bonus, it upgrades all these, reduces recharge time, gives me more auxiliary power, more shield capacity. So good little bonuses, and the console clickies are actually pretty good. This is radiation bombardment, gives me exotic damage and a turn rate, cone AoE, protomatter, hull restoration, shield restoration, drain, shield, and mycelium ambush. Mycelium ambush is, again, like I talked about, fun clicky. And then I'm using these guys, the Elite Scorpion Fighters, because they leave a trail of destruction and plasma, which is again buffed by EPG. Skills, pretty much the same skill tree, except you'll notice I prioritize beam over torpedoes for this guy. and I did put the 1 point in tactical readiness instead of shield mastery. Temporal strategist, traits, checkmate, Sif shunt. So when I heal myself, when I'm at 100% hull, it gives me more power. Emergency weapon cycle, improved gravity well. Again, because I don't have as many traits on this character to work with yet. I probably could try Black Alert or something else like that. Station-wise, chronometric field 3, destabilizing resonance beam, gravity well, subspace vortex, energy siphon, torp spread 2, firewall 3. So again, any combination like that. And then stat-wise, about 14 and 100. And the EPG is 368, 236 on drain, and 225 control. So a little bit more drain on this character just from the consoles. And again, it works very similar to the other builds. I would use one similar to the Crossfield for any of the temporal ships or Paradox, etc. Let's go back to that one real quick. So this one is probably the more friendly aim for build without using anything else, because again, there's only one low-buy console on the entire ship, which is only a nice to have, not a necessary. Using quest rewards, so using the House Martok set. You're using one rep set, so definitely an easy one to aim for. And we'll run a quick CCA, assuming it comes up, just so you guys can see big numbers, etc. And we'll parse it just for funsies. Ooh, that was too quick. Combat log 1. Here we go. Oh yeah, quick pop, and then we'll just sit here and wait, because funsies. Oh, while we wait. Here we go. Now, of course, I have the chat window open, so now I have to close the chat window before I can do anything. Yay! Stomp is smart. I are smart. Now, honestly, I love this one when I have stealth, but I don't have stealth on this ship. Go away, go away. Everyone's gonna beat me to the crystalline entity. I'm just gonna give them higher damage than me. So again, there's that. Pop all the controls. All the abilities. I have lots of threat. Now I forgot to use my console, the Lorca maneuver. Should have given me a little nice bonus, but it is what it is. I'm not worried about it. First place. Some of those for the fleet. Keep going. Kill everything, because why not? And let's see how that went. I really need to disable the visuals. That's just ugly. Alright, let's see. Browse. Alright, so from that CCA, as you can see, it was 167 K DPS. And if you look at the analysis for me, stomp bar, gravimetric rift, 46K, gravity well 3, 31K. So the torpedo alone, the rifts from it, were the highest damage for the build. Again, because it's buffed by control, buffed by EPG. 31K, my pets did 21K, so that's the photonic fleet. Subspace vortex did 21K. The deflector did 10K. Delphic Terror did almost 9. Gravimetric photon torpedo, just the torpedo initial detonation, did 8. Resonance beam 5. Kinetic cutting beam, almost 3. Neutronic, looks like I didn't get any neutronic spreads. I might add a second torpedo spread to get more spreads. That only did 2.5. Pulse emitter did about 2. Entropic rider 2. Kinetic shearing, etc. Going on down, so lots of abilities as you can see. And if we look at the DPS chart, so here I am, started out kind of low because I wasn't in range, and popped up to about 160, and kept pretty steady 160 as you can see on damage-wise. It really doesn't drop or spike low. Lots of other builds, you'll see them kind of spike up, and then they drop, and then they spike up, and they drop. So again, if you guys have any questions, let me know.